Under the fractured moon, a single drop of blood traced the curve of her cheek like a forbidden prophecy. Ilara stumbled through the whispering pines, her breath ragged clouds in the merciless northern wind. The snow clung to her tattered cloak, heavy as the weight of betrayal that had driven her from the pack's hearth. She was no longer the Omega who had once warmed the edges of their firelit gatherings, her quiet strength overlooked until it shattered their world. Now she was a ghost in the white expanse, banished for the sin of creation, a child born of impossible union, half wolf, half vampire, a hybrid abomination that blurred the sacred lines drawn by fang and claw. The forest was a labyrinth of silvered shadows, the moon's pale gaze filtering through skeletal branches to paint the ground in ghostly luminescence. Ilara's bare feet bled into the frost, each step a sharp communion with the earth's unyielding cold. She clutched the small bundle against her chest, the only warmth left in her unraveling life. Her son, barely 3 moons old, stirred faintly, his tiny form wrapped in the remnants of her shawl. His eyes, when they fluttered open in the night, held the unnatural glow of twilight, amber flecked with crimson, a mark that had sealed her fate. The pack's howls echoed distantly, a chorus of judgment that chased her deeper into exile. They had come for her at dawn, the elders' eyes hard as glacial ice, their voices laced with the fervor of ancient law. "You have defiled the bloodline," the beta had snarled, his claws extended, the scent of fear and fury thick in the air. Her mate, no, the wolf who had claimed her briefly in a haze of instinct, had turned away, his guilt a silent blade. He was of noble line, destined for alpha rights, and she, an Omega with a hidden vein of shadow in her veins, had ruined him with her cursed womb. Ilara collapsed against a jagged rock, the wind keening like a lament through the trees. Her body ached from the birth's toll, the hidden cave where she had labored alone, now a fading memory of blood-soaked moss and solitary screams. The hybrid child had emerged under that same fractured moon, his first cry a blend of wolfish wail and vampiric hiss, drawing predators from the dark. Wolves sensed the dilution of their purity. Vampires, ever hungry for novelty, whispered of power in his veins. Both covens and packs now hunted her, not for mercy, but to erase the anomaly she cradled. She unwrapped the bundle, just enough to gaze at him. His skin was pale as fresh snow, yet warm with the pulse of life that defied the night's chill. A small silver pendant hung around her neck, its lunar crescent etched with runes from her mother's forgotten lore, a symbol of the Deusa's veiled gifts, now stained with a drop of her own blood from the birth. It had been her talisman, a whisper of hidden strength, but tonight it felt like a chain, marking her as the vessel of chaos. Tears froze on her lashes as memories clawed at her mind. The rejection had been swift, a ritual casting under the full moon's judgment. Stripped of her place by the fire, she had been dragged to the pack's edge, the Alpha's decree ringing like thunder. Leave or die with your mistake. The child was the proof of her transgression, a union forged in secrecy with a rogue vampire wanderer, his touch a fleeting storm that left her forever changed. The pack saw only betrayal. She saw destiny's cruel hand, weaving threads of light and shadow into her fragile form. The wind shifted, carrying the metallic tang of approaching blood. Ilara's senses sharpened, the Omega instinct flaring despite her exhaustion. Distant weavos morphed into something sharper, vampiric shrieks slicing the air like shattered glass. They were closing in, the hunters from both worlds, drawn by the hybrid's scent like moths to a forbidden flame. She rose, legs trembling, and pressed on, the snow swallowing her tracks as if the earth itself conspired to hide her flight. In the heart of the forest, a frozen river gleamed under the moon, its surface a mirror of fractured stars. Ilara paused, the pendant warm against her skin, pulsing faintly as if alive. It had been her mother's, passed down through whispers of old magic, said to guide the lost. Now it seemed to hum with the child's essence, a bridge between worlds she could not cross. What strength was this, she wondered, if not the mercy to endure for one so innocent? The Diusa's symbols mocked her. Lunar light on ice, the fire of her inner resolve flickering against the encroaching dark. A low growl rumbled from the shadows ahead, not wolf, not vampire, but something burdened and alone. Ilara froze, her heart a drumbeat in the silence. The figure emerged slowly, cloaked in midnight fur and etched with scars that spoke of battles long lost. He was no ordinary hunter. His eyes held the weight of a crown unseen. A king in exile, his breath misting the air with the scent of ancient guilt. The pendant at her throat warmed, as if recognizing kin in the night. She backed away, clutching her son tighter, the wind howling their shared solitude. In that moment, under the moon's indifferent watch, exile became not just survival, but the forge of something unbreakable, a thread of redemption woven from blood and frost. The figure stepped fully into the moonlight, his silhouette fracturing against the frozen river like a blade tempered in sorrow. Ilara's breath caught, a fragile vapor in the biting air, as she pressed her back against the unyielding trunk of an ancient pine. The child in her arms whimpered softly, a sound that twisted her heart like thorns beneath the snow. Who was he? Not the guttural rage of her former pack, nor the silken malice of vampiric scouts that slithered through the shadows. This one moved with the deliberate grace of a predator who had long forgotten the thrill of the hunt, his midnight cloak, fur-lined and ragged at the hems, trailing whispers of frost in his wake. His eyes met hers, twin embers glowing faintly amber beneath furrowed brows, shadowed by scars that mapped a lifetime of unspoken wars. A king. She sensed it instinctively, the weight of unseen thrones pressing upon his broad shoulders, where the fur parted to reveal the glint of a silver chain bearing a crest long faded. Blood trickled from a gash across his forearm, dark and viscous, staining the snow in crimson petals that steamed faintly against the cold. He was wounded, not by fang or claw alone, but by something deeper, a curse that hung about him like the scent of smoldering ash, mingling with the metallic tang of his exertion. "Stay your fear, wanderer," his voice rumbled, low and resonant, carrying the timbre of ancient forests and forgotten oaths. It wrapped around her like the wind's caress, stirring an unwelcome warmth in her chest that she immediately quelled. Ilara clutched the bundle tighter, her fingers numb yet fierce, the silver pendant at her throat pulsing with a heat that mirrored the child's hidden fire. It had warmed before, in moments of peril, but now it thrummed as if in recognition, drawing her gaze to the similar glint at his neck. A lunar emblem, etched with runes that echoed her own, fate's cruel jest, binding strangers in the night's indifferent embrace. She did not flee, though every instinct screamed to vanish into the white veil. Instead, she held her ground, the river's icy murmur at her feet a counterpoint to the pounding of her pulse. "What do you want from us?" Her words emerged sharp, laced with the defiance born of endless flight, though her voice trembled like leaves in the gale. The child stirred again, his tiny hand unfurling against her breast, and in that instant she felt the instinctive pull, a thread of connection, raw and unbidden, linking her omega essence to the alpha aura that radiated from him despite his broken stance. He halted several paces away, respecting the invisible barrier of her wariness, his breath clouding the space between them. Up close, the scars told their tale, a jagged line across his jaw from some long-ago betrayal, the faint burn of silver along his collarbone from a vampiric curse he had barely survived. "I seek no harm," he said, his gaze flicking to the bundle, then back to her face, lingering on the blood-flecked tear tracks frozen upon her cheeks. "The night hunts you, as it does me. Wolves bay for purity's sake, and the blood drinkers crave the anomaly in your arms. I know the scent of exile, it clings like frost to the soul. Alara's mind reeled, curiosity warring with the terror that coiled in her gut. How could he know? The pendant burned hotter now, a silent sentinel against her skin, its crescent shape seeming to glow faintly, casting prismatic shadows on the snow. She had heard whispers in the pack's lore of the alpha king of the northern clans, Thorn, who had vanished after a massacre that shattered alliances, guilt-ridden, cursed by his own hand for failing to protect his kin from a vampire incursion. Was this him? The man whose decrees had once echoed through the mountains, now reduced to a shadow prowling the fringes? "You speak as if you understand," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the wind's mournful sigh. The forest seemed to hold its breath, Weavos distant yet closing, a symphony of pursuit that underscored their fragile standoff. Thorn, or whatever remnant of him stood before her, winced as he shifted, pressing a gauntleted hand to his wound. Blood welled anew, dripping onto the ice with a soft hiss, and Alara felt an inexplicable ache in her own veins, as if his pain echoed through the pendant's ancient magic. "I understand loss," he replied, his eyes darkening with the weight of memory. "A king's crown is forged in fire and blood, but mine. It crumbles under the ash of choices I cannot unmake." He took a step closer, not in threat, but in the shared vulnerability of the hunted, his presence stirring the air with the musky scent of pine and iron resolve. The connection sparked then, instinctive and denied, a pull deep in her core, omega to alpha, healer to the wounded. Yet she resisted, rationalizing it as survival's illusion, born of fear's cold grip and the curiosity that bloomed like a fragile flame in the dark. The child's eyes opened briefly, that twilight glow piercing the gloom, and Thorn froze, his breath hitching. "A hybrid," he murmured, not with revulsion, but a quiet awe laced with sorrow. The Dusa weaves strange threads under her moon. Alara's heart clenched. No one had looked upon her son without hatred or hunger. This gaze held something else, melancholy recognition, as if he saw in the infant a mirror to his own fractured legacy. From the tree line, a sharper cry rent the night, vampiric, hungry, drawing nearer. Thorn's hand instinctively went to the hilt of a sword half-sheathed at his side, its blade etched with lunar runes that matched her pendant's glow. "They come for you both," he said, urgency threading his tone. "Run with me or stand alone. The choice is yours, but the frost claims no mercy." Alara hesitated, the wind whipping her hair like spectral fingers, the pendant now a bridge she could not ignore. Fear and curiosity tangled within her, birthing a tentative trust amid the storm. She nodded once, a silent accord forged in the moon's pale witness as they turned toward the shadowed depths together. The river cracked faintly behind them, a warning of pursuits unrelenting, while the first flakes of new snow danced like omens of trials yet to come. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow fell thicker now, a relentless shroud weaving through the pines like the Dusa's own veil, muffling the world's sharp edges. Ilara's legs burned with each labored step, the child's weight a sacred anchor pulling her deeper into the shadowed ravine. Thorn moved ahead, his broad form cutting a path through the drifts, his cloak billowing like wings of midnight against the moon's fractured glow. She followed not from blind trust, but from the raw necessity of survival, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and fleeting warmth. How could she, the outcast bearer of forbidden blood, align her fate with this scarred king? Yet the pendant at her throat thrummed steadily, its silver crescent a quiet pulse syncing with the rhythm of his strides, as if the night itself conspired to bind them. The wind howled in pursuit, carrying the guttural snarls of wolves and the high, keening shrieks of vampires, enemies united in their disdain for the hybrid anomaly she cradled. Alara glanced back once, her breath a frozen plume, catching glimpses of eyes glinting in the dark, amber fury from the pack, crimson hunger from the undead. The air reeked of iron and decay, a metallic bite that clawed at her senses, reminding her of the birth's crimson flood, the cave's mossy chill where life had torn from her in agony. Her son stirred against her chest, his tiny form radiating an unnatural heat that pierced the frost, his twilight eyes half open, watching the world with innocent curiosity. What mercy was this, she pondered in the recesses of her weary heart, that such purity could summon such savagery? Thorn veered sharply left, leading them toward a jagged outcrop where the mountain's flank rose like a sentinel carved from ice and stone. "Here," he growled over his shoulder, his voice a low rumble that cut through the gale. He shoved aside a curtain of icicles dangling from an overhanging ledge, revealing the mouth of a cavern half hidden by snowdrifts. Ilara hesitated at the threshold, the darkness within yawning like an unspoken promise or trap. The pendant warmed against her skin, casting a faint, ethereal light that danced on the walls like captured moonlight, urging her forward. She stepped inside, the sudden hush enveloping them as Thorn dragged a fallen boulder to seal the entrance, his muscles straining under the fur of his cloak, blood from his wound seeping fresh trails down his arm. The cavern was a womb of stone, its floor scattered with crystalline frost that crunched softly underfoot. A narrow crevice high above let in slivers of lunar light, illuminating veins of quartz that gleamed like frozen rivers of silver. Ilara sank against the wall, her body trembling from exhaustion, the child's soft whimpers echoing in the confined space. Thorn knelt a respectful distance away, tearing a strip from his cloak to bind his gash, his movements deliberate, etched with the quiet discipline of one who had commanded legions, yet now commanded only his solitude. The scent of him filled the air, pine resin, warm earth, and the faint, underlying tang of old blood, stirring something primal in her omega core, a pull she shoved down like embers beneath ash. "You need fire," he said, not meeting her eyes, his fingers working the cloth with practiced efficiency. From a pouch at his belt, he drew flint and a bundle of dry tinder, striking sparks that bloomed into a small flame. The fire crackled to life in a shallow depression, its golden tongues licking the chill, casting flickering shadows that played across his scarred face. Warmth spread tentatively, thawing the numbness in Ilara's limbs, but it could not touch the ice in her soul. She watched him, curiosity gnawing at her fear. This Alpha King, whispered in pack tales as the unyielding guardian of the northern clans, now huddled like a fugitive, his amber eyes reflecting the flames with a melancholy depth. Guilt clung to him, visible in the slump of his shoulders, the way his gaze lingered on the fire as if it held answers to sins long buried. "Why help us?" she asked, her voice a whisper threaded with suspicion as she adjusted the bundle in her lap. The child cooed, his small hand reaching toward the light, fingers curling like budding claws. Ilara's heart ached at the sight, innocence forged in shadow, a living rebuke to the world's rigid laws. Thorn paused, the firelight carving hollows beneath his eyes, and for a moment the cavern seemed to contract, the wind outside a distant roar. "Because I know the bite of exile," he replied, his tone laced with the weight of forgotten thrones. "My kin fell to vampire blades under my watch, a betrayal from within, my brother's hand turned by bloodlust. I carry the curse of survival, the Deuce's mocking gift." He extended his bound arm slightly, revealing the silver burn along his collarbone, a mark that mirrored the runes on her pendant. It glowed faintly in the fire's warmth, syncing with hers in a subtle hum that sent a shiver through her veins. Empathy stirred unbidden, a fragile bridge across their shared wounds. She saw not a king, but a man fractured by duty's cruel forge, much like her own shattering under rejection's blade. The howls grew nearer, vibrating through the stone, and Ilara tensed, clutching her son closer. Thorn rose swiftly, sword drawn, its lunar-etched blade catching the firelight in prismatic flashes. "They've scented us," he murmured, positioning himself between her and the sealed entrance. A low growl emanated from outside, followed by the scrape of claws on rock. Wolves first, their pack instincts drawn to the hybrid's taint. Then a hiss, silken and venomous, as vampiric shadows slithered in tandem. Their alliance a temporary venom born of mutual threat. Ilara's breath quickened, the pendant blazing now, its heat spreading through her chest like liquid fire. She felt it then, a surge within, not just fear, but a hidden strength awakening, the Deuce's veiled gift stirring in her blood. The child whimpered, and instinctively she hummed a lullaby from her mother's lore, the notes weaving with the fire's crackle, calming him. Thorn glanced back, his eyes softening for the first time, a flicker of wonder cutting through his melancholy. In that shared vigil, as the enemies clawed at the barrier, empathy deepened into something irrevocable, a bond forged not in passion, but in the quiet terror of protection, rationalized as mere alliance, yet resisted no longer. The boulder shuddered under a combined assault, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface, but Thorn held firm, his presence a bulwark against the night. Ilara met his gaze across the flames, the lunar light from the crevice bathing them in silver, and in her heart, the first threads of trust wove tighter, born of mercy's quiet flame amid the encroaching storm. What was strength, if not choosing to shelter the broken, even as the world sought to bury them in frost? The boulder trembled once more, a thunderous crack splitting the air as claws and fangs battered its unyielding mass. Ilara's heart hammered in sync with the assault, each vibration sending tremors through her bones, the cavern's chill seeping deeper into her marrow. She pressed her son closer, his warmth a defiant ember against the encroaching frost, while the fire's flames danced erratically, casting elongated shadows that clawed at the walls like spectral hands. Thorn stood resolute, his sword a silver arc in the firelight, runes along its edge pulsing with an inner glow that mirrored the pendant's insistent thrum against her skin. The silver crescent burned now, not with mere heat, but a living fire that coursed through her veins, awakening something long dormant, a whisper from the Deuce's shadowed realm, stirring the Omega blood she had always dismissed as weakness. Outside, the cacophony swelled, wolves' guttural snarls blending with vampires' sibilant hisses, a unholy chorus baying for the hybrid's erasure. The air thickened with their scents, musk of fur and fury, rot of ancient graves, seeping through fissures in the stone, turning the cavern's sanctuary into a fragile cage. Ilara's breath came in shallow gasps, her mind fracturing under the weight of terror and exhaustion. She had fled her pack's rejection, the Alpha's cold decree echoing in her soul like a perpetual winter gale. Your blood taints us all. The birth had been her undoing, the child's twilight eyes a beacon for this relentless hunt. Yet in this moment, cradling him amid the storm, she felt not just fear, but a rising tide within, unbidden and fierce. Thorn glanced back, his amber eyes locking onto hers across the flickering divide, a silent question in their depths. "Hold fast," he murmured, his voice a low anchor amid the chaos, laced with the melancholy resolve of one who had stared into too many abysses. But as the boulder groaned, splintering under a particularly savage blow, a vampire's claw raking through, drawing a thin line of moonlight into the dim, he faltered, his stance wavering. Blood from his earlier wound soaked through the makeshift bandage, dripping onto the frost-kissed floor with a soft, steaming sizzle. The silver burn on his collarbone flared, visible beneath the parted fur of his cloak, and Ilara saw it then. The curse that bound him, a vampiric venom woven into his flesh, slowly eroding his alpha strength, turning his once unbreakable will to ash. The pendant's heat surged, a molten river flooding her chest, and with it came the manifestation, a vision, sharp and visceral, unfolding in her mind like a tapestry unraveled by lunar threads. She gasped, her free hand clutching the silver crescent, its runes igniting with ethereal light that spilled from her fingers, bathing the cavern in a soft, prismatic glow. Images cascaded. Thorns passed, a crown of ice and bone atop a throne in a frost-bound hall, shattered by betrayal. His brother's silhouette, eyes crimson with turned allegiance, leading vampires through the clan's defenses. Blood on snow, howls of the fallen, and Thorn's roar of anguish as he struck down his kin, only to be marked by the venom that now poisoned his blood. The Deuce's moon hung overhead in the vision, fractured as it was tonight, whispering of a redeemer, an omega of shadowed lineage, bearer of the hybrid flame, whose touch could unmake curses and forge destinies anew. Alara's eyes widened, the glow from the pendant reflecting in her tears, frozen midway down her cheeks. The child's hand tightened on her shawl, his tiny pulse syncing with hers, amplifying the surge until it radiated outward, a palpable force that wrapped around Thorn like invisible tendrils. He stiffened, sword lowering slightly as the light reached him, the silver burn on his skin hissing faintly, the venom receding under its purifying touch. The pain in his eyes eased, replaced by a dawning awe that cracked the melancholy mask he wore. "What? What are you?" he breathed, stepping closer, the enemy's assault forgotten in the cavern's sudden hush. The boulder held, as if the mountain itself bowed to this revelation, the wind outside falling to a mournful whisper. She trembled, the vision fading, but its truth searing her soul. The Dom Occulto, her mother's whispered legacy, the Pathfinder's gift buried in Omega veins, had awakened not in isolation, but in this shared exile. "I am the bridge," she whispered, her voice raw with the weight of it. The words tasting of blood and frost on her tongue. The pendant cooled slightly, but its light lingered in her eyes, amber flecked with the same crimson twilight as her son's. She had always been more than the overlooked hearthkeeper, her blood a confluence of wolf and shadow, hidden until the hybrid's birth called it forth. Rejection had not broken her. It had been the forge, preparing her for this moment where mercy's light pierced the dark. Thorn knelt before her, not as king to subject, but as one soul recognizing its counterpart, his scarred hand hovering near hers without touching, reverence in the gesture. The curse's grip loosened further, the burn fading to a dull scar under the pendant's lingering aura, and in his gaze, Alara saw the realization bloom. She was the key, the Deuce's chosen vessel to shatter his chains, to redeem the fallen throne through the hybrid's pure potential. The prophecies spoke of a light in the exile, he said, his tone laced with wonder and lingering guilt, the fire's warmth now secondary to the bond igniting between them. An Omega who heals what kings destroy, you are the unraveling of my fate. The child's eyes opened fully then, glowing with that forbidden twilight, and a soft hum emanated from him, harmonizing with the pendant's echo, filling the cavern with a serene vibration that pushed back the shadows. Ilara felt it in her core, a spiritual unveiling, the moon's fractured light from the crevice above aligning with the runes on the walls, as if the Deusa herself witnessed this birth of purpose. Yet doubt lingered in her heart, a tragic undercurrent to the revelation. Was this destiny a gift or another chain, binding her to a king's burdens amid the hunt that raged without? The enemy's cries renewed, fainter now, repelled by the unseen barrier her awakening had woven, but the night pressed on, demanding more. Thorn rose, renewed vigor in his frame, extending a hand to her. "With you, the hybrid's light becomes our weapon," he said, his voice steady for the first time, the melancholy yielding to ethical resolve. Ilara took it hesitantly, the contact sparking a visceral connection, warmth against cold, blood calling to blood, resisted no longer, but embraced as the path to Renascimento. The pendant rested between them, a symbol of truths unveiled, as the cavern's hush deepened, pregnant with the trials to come. What was destiny, if not the courage to wield hidden light against the encroaching endless night? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The moon hung low, its fractured face a shattered mirror reflecting the scars of the world below, as Ilara and Thorn emerged from the cavern's womb into the ravine's silvered throat. The night had deepened, snowflakes swirling like restless spirits caught in the wind's lament, each one a fleeting witness to the path they now forged together. Ilara's hand lingered in Thorn's, the contact a tentative bridge over the chasm of her doubts, the pendant at her throat pulsing with the residual glow of revelation. Her son's warmth against her chest was a quiet anchor, his twilight eyes closed in uneasy slumber, but the air thrummed with impending reckoning, the scent of blood and betrayal thickening like fog rolling from the pines. They moved swiftly through the narrowing gorge, the mountain's flanks rising like ancient guardians, etched in ice, their surfaces veined with frozen rivers that caught the lunar light in prismatic shards. Thorn's stride was steadier now, the curse's venom subdued by her awakening gift. Yet guilt shadowed his features, a melancholy veil that deepened with every step. "The pack gathers at the Frostvale Pass," he murmured, his breath misting the chill, voice laced with the weight of crowns long forsaken. "My brother's shadow lingers there, turned traitor, whispering alliances with the vampires. They seek the hybrid not to destroy, but to claim for power's throne." Ilara's heart clenched, a visceral ache blooming in her chest as memories clawed free. The pack's ritual casting, the alpha rival, KL, her former mate's ambitious kin, who had led the charge against her, his eyes burning with zealous fire as he branded her exile. He was no mere beta. Whispers in the hearth had painted him as Thorn's distant rival, a wolf hungry for the northern throne, now entwined with the undead in a bid to reshape the bloodlines. The pendant warmed against her skin, its crescent runes humming a warning, syncing with the distant weavos that echoed through the peaks. Her old pack, drawn by the hybrid's scent, mingling with vampiric shrieks like shattered crystal on stone. The ravine opened abruptly onto the Frostvale Pass, a vast plateau blanketed in pristine white, bordered by jagged spires that clawed at the sky. Torches flickered in the distance, their flames guttering against the gale, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the snow. The assembly was there, wolves in furred cloaks, their forms hulking and amber-eyed, flanked by lithe vampires whose pale skins gleamed unnaturally under the moon. At the center stood Kale, his alpha frame broad and unyielding, a mane of dark fur framing a face twisted by ambition, his claws extended as he sniffed the air. Beside him, a vampiric lord, Thorn's brother, Elias, his once noble features now gaunt and crimson-veined, eyes glowing with the thirst of the turned, held a chain of silver links etched with runes that mocked the pendant's sacred glow. Thorn halted at the pass's edge, his hand tightening around Ilara's, pulling her behind an outcrop of ice-crusted rock. The wind howled through the gap, carrying the metallic tang of drawn blood and the musky fury of the pack, whipping her hair like spectral fingers. Her body trembled, not from cold alone, but the raw flood of the past crashing against her resolve. The rejection's sting, Kale's snarl as he tore her from the hearth. "Your whelp poisons the blood of alphas." She had been their omega, unseen until her hidden shadow veins birthed the hybrid, now the prize in this convergence of old wounds. "Brother," Thorn called out, stepping into the open, his voice a resonant thunder that cut the gale, sword drawn and gleaming with lunar fire. The assembly turned as one, a sea of eyes, amber judgment and crimson hunger fixing upon him. Ilara peeked from cover, clutching her son. The pendant blazing now, its light spilling faintly over the snow like spilled moonlight. Thorn's silhouette fractured against the torches, scars illuminated in stark relief, his melancholy resolve hardening into ethical steel. "You sold our kin for this? For shadows and false thrones?" Elias laughed, a hollow echo that slithered through the night, stepping forward with predatory grace, his fangs glinting. "Survival, Thorn. The Deuce's old ways crumble under the endless night. The hybrid will bind wolves and vampires under my rule." Kale growled in agreement, circling with the pack, his gaze locking onto Alara's hiding place, nostrils flaring at the child's scent. "The Omega whore brings her curse," he spat, voice laced with the fervor of betrayal, "but we'll carve it from her veins." The confrontation erupted like a storm unleashed. Thorn lunged, blade clashing against Elias's claws in a spray of sparks and blood, the snow churning to crimson slush beneath them. Weavos rose, wolves charging as vampires unfurled wings of shadow, the pass becoming a maelstrom of fur, fang, and frost. Ilara's world narrowed to the chaos, the wet rip of flesh, the sizzle of blood on ice, the wind's keen mingling with agonized howls. Her pendant surged, visions flashing. Kyle's ambition, born of envy for Thorn's crown, allying with Elias to topple the king. Her own past, the fleeting union with the rogue vampire that seeded the hybrid, now the fulcrum of this war. She emerged then, driven by the awakening fire in her blood, the child in one arm, her free hand outstretched. The pendant's light flared, a radiant barrier that halted the nearest wolves, their forms recoiling as if burned by lunar purity. "Enough!" Her voice rang out, raw and amplified by the Deuce's gift, echoing off the spires like a prophecy unveiled. Thorn broke free, bloodied but unbowed, positioning himself at her side while Elias and Kale paused, eyes narrowing in wary calculation. The moral crux loomed, heavy as the mountain's shadow. Forgiveness or war, love's fragile chain or freedom's solitary frost. Alara met Kale's gaze, the pack's betrayal a blade in her soul, yet the hybrid stirred, his innocent pulse a call to mercy. "You cast me out for fear," she said, voice steady amid the wind's wail, tears freezing on her lashes. "But this child is no curse. He is the bridge you dread. Join us in redemption, or let war claim your thrones." Thorn's hand found hers again, his touch a vow unspoken. The connection no longer resisted, but a chosen path, weaving her freedom to his burdened heart. Elias sneered, lunging anew, but Kale hesitated, the alpha rival's eyes flickering with doubt, the weight of blood spilled for power cracking his resolve. The battle hung in suspension, snow falling thicker, blanketing the bloodied ground as Alara faced the dilemma. Offer pardon to those who had shattered her, binding her to Thorn's world of duty and love, or flee into exile's embrace, sacrificing alliance for unyielding solitude. The moon watched, indifferent, its light on the pendant a silent query. What was true strength if not the mercy to forgive the unforgivable, even as the night demanded blood? The past trembled with the choice unborn, the wind carrying whispers of destinies teetering on the edge of frost and flame. The wind across Frostvale Pass whipped into a frenzy, carrying the coppery scent of spilled blood and the acrid bite of scorched fur, as if the mountain itself wept for the choices teetering on its frozen edge. Ilara stood at the heart of the maelstrom, her frame slight, yet unyielding against the gale, the hybrid child cradled in one arm like a fragile ember defying the storm. The pendant at her throat blazed with an inner fire, its lunar crescent casting a radiant halo that pierced the swirling snow, illuminating the faces of her accusers, Kale's amber eyes flickering with the torment of ambition's hollow victory, Elias's crimson gaze twisted in vampiric hunger, and Thorn's steady presence at her side, a bulwark forged from guilt and newfound resolve. The pass was a canvas of chaos, crimson streaks marring the pristine white, torches guttering like dying stars, their flames reflecting in the eyes of wolves and vampires frozen in wary suspension. Her heart pounded, a visceral drum echoing the distant uivos that clawed at the night, each beat a reminder of the rejection that had birthed this moment, the pack's cold exile, the Alpha's decree stripping her of hearth and home, leaving her to wander with a son deemed abomination. Yet in Thorn's grip, her hand felt anchored, the connection no longer a resisted pull, but an accepted tether, rationalized through the lens of shared wounds, his curse healed by her light, her isolation eased by his ethical vow. The child's twilight eyes fluttered open, gazing up at her with innocent trust, his tiny warmth seeping through her cloak like a promise of worlds remade. What was freedom, she wondered, in the recesses of her soul, if it meant solitude's endless frost? Or was it the liberty to choose union, to weave redemption from the threads of blood and betrayal? Cale stepped forward, his massive form casting a long shadow across the bloodied snow, claws retracting slightly as doubt warred with his zealot's fire. "You speak of bridges, Omega," he growled, voice rough as grinding ice, the wind tearing at his furred mane. "But your whelp mocks the Deuce's laws, wolf and shadow fused in blasphemy. We cast you out to preserve the pack, not to crown your folly with mercy." His eyes darted to Thorn, envy flashing like a hidden blade. The fallen king, once his rival for the northern throne, now standing renewed beside the very outcast he had condemned. The assembly murmured, wolves shifting uneasily, vampires hissing in silken discord, their temporary alliance fraying under the pendant's purifying glow. Elias laughed again, a venomous rasp that slithered through the gale, lunging with claws extended toward the child. "Mercy is weakness, brother. The hybrid's blood will quench empires, mine." But Thorn intercepted, his sword a silver blur etched with lunar runes, clashing against the traitor's strike in a shower of sparks that lit the snow like fleeting stars. Blood welled from a fresh gash on Thorn's shoulder, steaming in the cold, yet he did not yield, his melancholy gaze hardening into the steel of a king reborn. "You chose shadows over kin, Elias. I choose light, even if it demands my end." The battle reignited in fragments. A wolf lunged at Alara, only to recoil from the barrier of light emanating from her pendant, its runes pulsing in rhythm with her quickened breath. A vampire swooped low, wings of shadow unfurling. But Thorn's blade severed the assault, crimson ichor splattering the ice. Alara's world blurred into sensation, the sting of wind-lashed cheeks, the metallic tang coating her tongue, the child's soft cry piercing her core like a sacred wound. Her dom occulto surged fully now, the Pathfinder's gift unfurling like roots through frozen earth. Visions cascaded of futures unwritten, paths where war birthed endless night or compassion forged a new dawn. She saw Cale's pack, torn by internal strife, their purity a lie masking fear. Elias's undead horde, crumbling without the hybrid's vital spark. And Thorn, his crown restored not by conquest, but by the healing touch of an Omega's mercy, their union a testament to love's redemptive forge. With a cry born of faith's desperate flame, Alara thrust the pendant forward, its light exploding outward in a wave of prismatic silver that washed over the pass. Wolves yelped, vampires shrieked, the force not destruction, but revelation, a searing truth that stripped illusions bare. Cale staggered, clutching his chest as the glow pierced his ambition, revealing the hollow core beneath, a beta's envy, not alpha's destiny. "What have you done?" he rasped, falling to one knee in the snow, the pack halting behind him, their howls silenced into uncertain whines. Elias writhed, the vampiric venom in his veins boiling under the lunar purity, his form convulsing as the curse mirrored Thorn's own, unmaking the betrayal that had turned him. "No, the power," he gasped, before collapsing into ash-dusted frost, his crimson eyes dimming to lifeless gray. The vampires scattered, their alliance shattered, fleeing into the shadowed spires as the wind carried their defeated hisses away. Thorn turned to her, bloodied and breathless, his scarred face softened by awe, the silver chain at his neck syncing with her pendant in a final, harmonious hum. "You chose us," he whispered, voice thick with the weight of Renascimento, pulling her close amid the settling snow. The child cooed, reaching out to touch Thorn's cheek, the hybrid's warmth bridging their worlds, a living symbol of sacrifice's yield, where Ilara's exile became the seed of unity, her hidden light curing the king's guilt, binding their fates in ethical embrace. Kyle rose slowly, the rival's fire quenched to embers of remorse, his pack gathering tentatively around the fallen traitor. "The Deusa reveals what fear blinds," he admitted, voice breaking like cracking ice, offering a bowed head in tentative allegiance. The pass fell quiet, the moon's fractured gaze now a benediction, bathing the bloodied ground in silver forgiveness. Ilara leaned into Thorn, the wind easing to a gentle sigh, her tears thawing on her skin, not of loss, but rebirth. Rejection had been her crucible, destiny her liberty, love not a reward, but the proof of strength in choosing mercy over vengeance, union over isolation. In that moment, under the moon's watchful eye, the hybrid child gurgled softly, his twilight glow illuminating a new era. Wolves and shadows no longer foes, but threads in the Deusa's vast tapestry. Thorn's hand rested on her shoulder, a vow etched in touch. Together they would rebuild, the fallen crown rising from frost and flame, redeemed by the Omega, who healed what the world sought to destroy. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the scars, as the northern confessions whispered of hope eternal, where every wound birthed a crown. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.